Hey Fish Fam, today let's talk about phenol. I want to talk about phenol because I got a comment the other day saying you really can't tell if a sponge is phenol free when you buy it at the store, and that's why you should buy an aquarium sponge, because those ones are clearly labeled phenol free. They are clearly labeled phenol free. That is true. Is that something that you actually need to worry about? Now, most of you probably remember the big BPA scare in plastic bottles that happened, I don't know, a decade ago. Now, BPA, bisphenol A, is basically just two phenols connected by a carbon atom. And that's a very dangerous chemical. 1 part per million in water is enough to kill 50% of fish in the water. It is more dangerous than phenol by itself. Phenol by itself is about 5 parts per million for a 50% death rate. So it's something that obviously you don't want to use. But it's something that's added to things as a compound that gets bound up in the chemistry. So in the case of plastic bottles, the polycarbonate clear bottles, it's added to them because it makes the plastic harder. And the danger of that is, if you leave the bottle in your car and it gets very hot, then some of those long-chain organic molecules will break down in the heat, and some of the BPA can leach out into the water. BPA is not really water-soluble in any meaningful sense. Very, very trace amounts will get into water, but like if you have a water bottle full of organic solvents, and you leave that in the car, that's going to be loaded with them. At lower temperatures, those compounds are stable. The epoxy that I use on this tank, Macro Epoxy 646, is about 25% phenol by weight when you get it just as a raw material. The SDS says 10 to 25%. It's somewhere in there. That's a lot. You do not want to drink the raw resin for that reason. But once it's in the resin, it binds up with the amide structures that build the actual resin, and it helps to reinforce it and make it harder. It doesn't make it rigid, but it makes it harder. So the fact that this is a high phenol content epoxy is the reason that I can have several 100-pound rocks down in the bottom of this tank without damaging the epoxy coating, because it is hard enough to deal with that. If it was going to leach out, it already would have. I would have sick fish. I would have dying fish. I don't. Now, Macro Epoxy makes a potable water version of this that also is 10 to 25% phenol because it gets bound up in it. Now, there used to be a qualifier on the potable water that it was only okay up to 73 degrees. That was all it was certified to do. That's no longer the case. There's no limitation on that. That limitation wasn't because it was actually only safe to 73 degrees, that's just because that's what the local certifying requirement was, and they didn't want to pay for a better certification. But you won't find that limitation anywhere in their documentation anymore. So it's not really a danger in that regard. It's not going to break out and come out and flood everywhere. Having said that, there is no phenol in polyurethane. There's a little bit of confusion about this, I think, because there is phenolic urethane foam. It's the kind of stuff they use for spray insulation when they do insulation in your roof. That hard, rigid foam. You can walk around on it and it won't deform because the phenol makes it hard and rigid, which is exactly the opposite of what you want in a sponge. Now, there are some sponges that do have phenol in them. A lot of phenol compounds are used as scents. So if you find a sponge that is scented, it may have phenol compounds as the odor. If you get a cellulose sponge, phenol, for some reason, is used to soak the cellulose in some sponge manufacturing. I've never, heard anything about that, other than one patent filed in India on making cellulose sponges that was filed back in the 70s. That's the only thing I've ever been able to find that has anything to do with that. But cellulose sponges clearly say don't put them in an aquarium on the package. So that's not really a big danger. The sponges that you're going to buy in the aquarium shop are going to be almost universally polyurethane sponges. They're going to be large pore size polyurethane sponges. And they don't use it in that. So when these boxes say carefully selected phenol-free sponges, trying to make it sound like they had to search and search and search to find a source that wasn't gonna fill this with toxic crap, they're just playing scare tactics. They're just lying to you, hoping that they can scare you into buying their product. Because the same companies that do this will turn around and sell you tea tree oil, which arguably is just as dangerous. It's something that is hard to use safely. It has a lot of the same interactions that phenol does. That's why it has antimicrobial properties, because it goes in and it kills things. And it's very easy to overdose and kill all your fish with this stuff. They don't really care about the safety of your fish, they care about selling you things. Do you need to worry about phenol in a polyurethane sponge? No. It would make the sponge rigid. Are they going to add it afterwards as a scent? Maybe. Avoid scented sponges. If something has phenol in it, phenol the chemical, it has a sickeningly sweet, tarry smell. In incredibly low doses you can smell it. So if you have a sponge and you smell it and it smells like sickeningly sweet tar, don't use it. If it smells like anything, don't use it in your aquarium. But it's not something that you need to be panicked about, and that's important to understand. People just want to scare you into buying their overpriced crap. That's it for today. Everybody take it easy. We'll see you next time.